7 minutes on the Bunloit Rewilding project. So this is a project of nature recovery where, in essence, one of the things we're trying to do is help landowners in the coming land management system change that the government's tell us is coming in Scotland. And the rationale for this, the rationale for my, doing this project and for the government's changing all the rules is the twin disasters of the climate meltdown and biodiversity collapse. And we need rapid revolutions to deal with both of these. And what encourages me is that I do have personal experience of one of them, the solar solutions revolution, displacing fossil fuels, experiencing exponential growth with a company I set up called Solar Century. And here you see some of my former team installing solar on London Bridge. But that's not enough. Solar, wind, all the rest of it, whatever we do with all the hardware, we know we're going to have to take a lot of carbon dioxide down out of the atmosphere and do it while we repair biodiversity as well. So we need nature-based solutions revolution, and we're right at the beginning of that. We don't even really have a proper rule book yet because governments are still deliberating. So this is what we want to help out with. And as I say, I'm enormously encouraged to have seen this kind of exponential growth, experienced it, ridden the wave. And here you see what drove it in the cost down of solar panels in blue, the rise of the global market. And the company I set up actually grew a little bit faster than that. Not that it matters, but it's the feeling that we collectively have the ability to do this, human beings, that keeps me going. And it was started by high net worth individuals and family offices investing. The financial institutions and banks wouldn't come to the party, just like now with nature-based solutions, but they did once they had a seeing is believing proof of the viability of solar. And I think it'll be the same this time round. So one of the things we're trying to do on the Bunloit estate is, to use the jargon, natural capital verification science. So we're measuring everything, all our baselines, carbon, biodiversity, to try and help policymakers, invent the rule book, and of course to benefit from it economically, because we all have to do that as landowners, or else none of this is going to work. And I've already luckily raised quite a bit of money for this. And this is the first phase, Bunloit Rewilding, that was in 2020. And our expansion phase, we're calling, with breathtaking originality, Highlands Rewilding. And we're looking to capitalize that as well at the moment. So our purpose, nature recovery and community prosperity through rewilding. Here's a picture of the Bunloit estate in autumn. And, people define rewilding different ways, but ours is people and community centric. You can't rewild the land, and people have to be part of that. So our definition, which is similar to a number of other organizations in the Scottish Rewilding Alliance, involves job creation for guardians of the expanding wildland, as we refer to it. So we've started on 2 estates. One is Bunloit on the slopes of Loch Ness, 511 hectares. Beldorney a bit smaller, and whereas Bunloit is woodland dominated, Beldorney is grassland dominated. So we have a wonderful tableau on which to work on both of these 2 estates. They're about 2 hours apart, one on the fringes of the Northwest Highlands, one on the fringes of the Grampian Highlands. Quick tour of them. Bunloit, as I say, woodland dominated. We're so blessed in a relatively small estate to have all these different habitats so close together, a fabulous collage. And here you see some of the pictures, the oak woodland, the birch woodland, the Scots pine, our own mini Glen Africs. We've also got our fair share of monocultures and a bit of clearfeld land and wonderful riparian zones in the burns crossing the estate. We have our peatlands, more about these later. These are fascinating, proving to be fascinating. They're not that big, about 20% of the area of the estate, but they are terribly significant in the carbon story. We've got pastures, not as much as Beldorney, but beautiful pastures, very biodiverse, as we see in spring and summer. We've removed the sheep from them with the collaboration of our local licensed farmer, and he's replaced the sheep pro rata with Highland cattle, and we'll be having Highland ponies, proxy grazers from ancestral land. We're also lucky to have wild boar, maybe a few too many wild boar, as it turns out, as you see from the ploughed field on the right there, but also members of the ancestral grazing crew, as it were. Beldorney, very different kettle of fish. Here you see pictures of it soon after we bought the estate. It doesn't look so much like this anymore now because it's been resting for 6 months, and it's knee-high in grass. And a wonderful tableau for nature recovery going forward, with food production very much in the picture. I've just toured around the estate this morning with a delegation from the Scottish Rural College. And in the north of the estate, along the Deveron Valley, we have pristine broadleaf woodland, just like Bunloit, not as big, but you can see what can be done in terms of nature recovery and replanting, regenerating to get more of this kind of landscape. So to summarize the opportunities on both estates, we can do a big mix of all the things that need to be done. Rewilding, regeneration, replanting, agroforestry, regenerative agriculture of different kinds, horticulture as well, and of course natural capital, verification science as we go. We're already collaborating with a number of the centres of excellence in Scottish universities, and a lot of fun that is too. So we have a very experienced team, mostly Highlanders, very qualified and learning all the time themselves. There we are, most of us anyway. And just to give you a taster for what we're doing with the science, we will report to the Climate Summit in Glasgow, but here's a map of some of the peatlands at Bunloit with thickness data, and you can see it goes up to more than 4 meters thick. And without stealing our thunder, the relatively small areas of peatland are net sources of greenhouse gas emissions, significant net sources. Now, this is at first pass a bit depressing, but not until you realize how relatively easy it will be to repair this by 2 main interventions. One is removing the spindly and somewhat useless monoculture conifer plantations on the peat, and the other is blocking the drainage, which is significant. There's a lot of runoff from these areas. So that equation we'll report on fully at the COP. But how are we going to scale this operation? Because it needs to scale. I mean, not necessarily by us, but we collectively have to make this go very fast. And so our effort is to set up a new company. We're calling it Highlands Rewilding. It's just open for business, highlandsrewilding.co.uk. We're going to purchase and operate the vast majority of the Beldorney estate for nature recovery. And at the same time, we're going to scope opportunities to do the same on other tracts of land. And this is how we will make our contribution to scale. Meanwhile, hoping other people are doing the same thing so that, our market becomes saturated, and we'll be very happy if that happens, of course, and providing it with information from the rewilding science. So our aim is to increase the value of the shares in this company. It's a mass ownership company to at least 5% a year. And these shares will be tradable on a secondary market. So they'll be liquid. And the key thing, of course, is that the value of the shares will be rooted not just in our performance with nature-based solutions, but in the inevitable, probable rise in value of the land. So we want to create a unique shareholder community in all this. The type of affluent rewilding enthusiasts that have supported me up to date, 36 of them, averaging about £140,000 each, these kinds of people and family offices, but in parallel, via what we call our accessibility principle, a vehicle, a mechanism for spreading the shareholder base very wide. And on the Cedars platform, you can invest for as little as £10. They have a back office that can back that up. So very exciting to be able to bring in. We hope that there'll be lots of Scots who will go for this idea, and lots of Highland Scots in particular. And whether or not we can make that happen, there's going to be a longevity principle that would tie in the Highlands. It's called Highlands Rewilding. The majority of the team are going to be Highlanders. And in the articles, we'll guard the long-term locking in of carbon sequestered and biodiversity gained. And we'll set up a Highlands Rewilding Trust so that when I kick the bucket, or in 10 years' time, whichever comes first, naturally, I desperately hope it'll be 10 years' time, that a trust will take over and own all this off into the future, dominated by Highland Scots. So governance, I think that I've covered. And one of the things we will hope to do, of course, I think particularly on the Beldorney site, you see all these ruined crofts. There's a wonderful trust here called the Cabrac Trust, which is trying to bring people back to the land, create livelihoods on the land. And we'll do our level best to be players in that as this company, Highlands Rewilding, grows. So it will launch in mid-October, we hope. That may stretch a bit towards the Glasgow COP. We will carry on the fundraising all through the COP. And really our hope is that we can create, if you like, a platform for hope in a much needed time. And as I say, if this is of any interest at all, highlandsrewilding.co.uk, and happy to answer any questions going into the future. I'm Jeremy Legget at me.com. Thank you very much for your attention.
Okay, thank you very much, Jeremy. Can I ask you a quick question just before we move on to Alex? Do you think rewilding the right word? Does it, because there's a lot of management decisions required in what you're saying. A lot of people see rewilding as almost allowing nature to take its course. Is there a better phrase for this, or does it create the right impressions in people's minds?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a good point. And we have deliberated. Many people do deliberate, but we've decided to go with it, because as long as you define it, define what you mean, it's okay. And you can have those arguments, you know. I mean, my first interaction with Fergus Ewing, he said, oh, you just want to bring wolves back, that's all you're about. Well, no, Fergus, we're 10 minutes from the pub in Drumnadrochit. That's not true. So you just have those arguments and define what you mean by rewilding, you know?
Okay, fair enough. We'll come to some more questions that have been put already, but I'll hand over now to Alex Brewster, the second speaker in this session. So Alex, over to you, and we'll come back for questions to both of you afterwards. Thank you.
That's great. Hi, can you hear me all okay, can you?
Yep, all good.
Good. I'm just waiting for my PowerPoint to boot into your system, which seems to be a bit slow for some reason. Share that might help from the beginning. Right, good afternoon all. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak, and thanks to Scottish Land and Estates for providing the format. I'm Alex Brewster, and this is going a bit slow for some reason. Why is that not working? There we go. I'm Alex Brewster. I farm at Rotmell Farm at halfway between Dunkeld and Bunloit in Perthshire in central Scotland, and we've been here as a family since 1981. And I suppose we're specialists in grassland management, which is now known as regenerative management. If you're working with tall covers, we're effectively managing 180 head of cattle, about 600 composite sheep, and 4,000 hens over 1,000 hectares. Back in 2014-15, we got into rotational grazing, was to try and drive more efficiency out of farm business, and this was the state of the soils back then, which then sent me off on a major journey. This is the start of my Everest in a way, and we still haven't summited. So soils were tight and packed, there's lack of aeration, microbial activity was low, and I think carbon was a concept we hadn't even heard of to date. A slight panoramic across some of the farms, spring 16, there's no real grass growth there, there's not a lot happening, we're waiting on temperatures growing, we're not actually working with the landscape. And if you note the sheep, they're kind of mostly set stocked, which isn't great in any system. And the next slide, which I know is 5 years and 6 weeks later, but it's exactly the same block of land. It's upland pastures. Everything I'm talking today is about what would be effectively called rough grazing or permanent pastures. This is spring growth, and it's happening far quicker than it ever used to do because we've got far greater root depth. And here are effectively the tools of the trade. And that's why the powered pasture business got started importing electric fencing components globally, was we needed to create rest, we needed to manage utilisation. Initially, it was to maximise output through rotational grazing, but as we got more a great understanding of soils, plant biology, the realisation is that these fences allow us to create rest. And by creating rest, we allow pastures to be all that they can be. Grasses and what grows above the land is in charge of the complete ecosystem in the soil. And without them being able to express themselves, we then are unable to feed the microorganisms. Many of you will have seen this before. These are the dudes that make it all happen. These are the guys that allow us to stabilize carbons, allow us to manage water cycles, build organic matter. They allow root depths to punch their way down through the soil. If your soil compaction is greater than 300 psi, the root system has no ability whatsoever to penetrate that soil mass. You've got panning, you need fungi, bacteria, protozoa, nematodes. All these guys help alleviate compaction, open the soils up, which drives down roots, and then allows us to stabilize and store carbons at far greater depths in the soil. And these wee guys are very easily killed by modern ferts, chems, and antibiotics, pyrethroids, anything that we apply to the land that's been, let's just say, artificially manufactured, is hugely detrimental to keeping these microorganisms alive and active and functioning fully within the soil. And I suppose in summary, what I'm really into is the recycling business. What we're trying to build is a circular economy on farm, so a biological circular economy. Cows eat the pasture, we manage that process, they then recycle the nutrients, and in this medium here we have, in essence, a cow pat, but it's compost, it's humus, it's organic matter, and in 12 months that's topsoil. So again, we're building the resilience of the landscape on farm. But really what we're trying to do here ultimately is to grow topsoil, because without topsoil there is no food, there is no humanity. And we don't spend an awful lot of time discussing the relevance and the importance of topsoil to society as a whole. But as you can see in this slide, again, this is upland country. There's a lot of subsoil there, but you can see the microaggregates dropping down to the soil profile, root systems dropping far deeper. At this point, we're starting to stabilize carbons at depth. And because we're only ever really grazing off about 50 to 60% of the biomass on the surface and trampling the rest in, as you will see here, we're gradually, millimetre by millimetre, we're increasing the depth of topsoil on the farm as we go. Now, this here is the rest period. We've already grazed through here. These are all native grasses. Clovers, which I didn't see in this country 4 years ago, are now in a prevalence. We've increased the botanical diversity of plants growing. The seed bank's always been there. We're just giving it a chance to express itself. But now we're capturing a massive amount of light. We're capturing a lot of atmospheric CO2 with this diversity of plants. And at the same time, we're trapping moisture. And any rain that falls, I want to capture it on land. I really don't want to have it running off, especially as our weather patterns and rainfall patterns are starting to change. On a balance sheet, livestock are a capital asset. I think in the systems that we're now operating in, I see organic matter, root depth, stored carbon, pH of soil. They, to me, are the asset on my balance sheet. Livestock, anything that trades above us and moves above us, it's meat, it's food, it's a saleable commodity, but ultimately it's just cash and cash flow. Now, to me, to regenerate a landscape, you've got to rehydrate a landscape. And rehydration, holding moisture on land, and grabbing any small amounts of moisture as they pass through. We're running into longer dry periods of weather in Scotland than historically we're maybe used to, or greater downpours or big weather events than maybe we're used to. So it's super important that we can slow the hydrology of the landscape down, capture it when there's a massive downpour. But when we've had another dry summer, in any given morning, there's 1 mil to 2 mil of dew or condensation on leaves of plants. And if you've got a big biomass sitting there, you're collecting a 1 or 2 mil straight into the soil. It runs down the plant leaves into the soil, and over a 50-day period, there is another 2 inches of moisture that you're maybe not getting in a low, short-grazed sward. On the more extreme end of the farm, we're now running into 6 to 8 month rest periods, and that's allowing us to grow 4-foot grass covers. Within these areas here, we're getting a massive density of livestock per hectare, but ironically, our soil compaction is considerably less. And the total mineralization, the feed value, protein content, ME of these grasses, because we're monitoring all of this, are higher than the average across the rest of the farm. So as we punch root depths considerably deeper, we're actually dragging the macro and micronutrients back out of the secondary zone in the soil, which is allowing us to give our animals the base nutrition they're needing at a first-hand basis rather than buying in inputs as a second-hand basis. These to me are just a couple of cool photographs, livestock moving to fresh breaks, tall covers, and there's a mob of cows waiting to move on. Because this whole system is in transit. When we started this back in 15, 16, carbon was never talked about. Regeneration was something we didn't know an awful lot about. And all these modern buzzwords that have been dragged out of the dictionary. In the end, it turns out it's just working with natural ecosystems. And the more you do it, the more you get your head around it, the more this all tends to make sense. But we're also having to adapt the genetic profile of the animals on farm to cope with the changes that are taking place. If they've been bred in high input systems, they don't quite enjoy a system that's more self-reliant. So we're having to manage the gene pool of the herd and flock. Also, there's a massive epigenetic angle at play as well, because ultimately what we're trying to do is create cows and sheep that are resilient to the climate. They have a resilience to the farm system and the management changes. And in the bottom right is a composite sheep. Again, this is about a diversity of genetics. So we're building a diversity of microorganisms, a greater diversity of pastoral plants, and a greater genetic diversity spread of genes across the farming system, which is allowing us to build a greater resilience at multiple levels within the farming or the land use operation. But a regenerative landscape is a mindset change. And it takes a wee bit to get your head around of what we're needing to do. You can't use technology necessarily or go shopping necessarily to dig yourself back out of a hole. You have to manage through situations. Ultimately, what my game is about producing food. Food is ultimately nutrition. And so this concept of total nutrition has arisen through what we're doing here, that if the soils are fully energized, if the microbes are active and working, if the pastoral plants are supercharged, Brix values are strong, then we're producing really, really healthy red meat. Now that steak's got to look good, it's got to taste amazing, and the environmental credentials that we're building behind it allow us to take this product into our local marketplace. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Alex. Can I just ask you, what was your motivation at the very start of moving down this path, and what was your long-term objective, and how have all those changes that you talked about over the last 5 or 6 years affected how you look at the long term? Like you say, people weren't really talking about carbon. Natural capital was kind of early days. So how was that journey for you? How was that, your mindset at the start? How has that changed over the years?
This journey for me has been about continual problem solving. The smallest ruminant we have on farm is lambs, and they all seem to be short of trace elements. yet we could find the macro and micronutrients in the soil through alberic soil testing. So the base element was there, but why was not animal available? So that then got us into root structures and plants and diversity of plants. And ultimately the journey has been about finding a solution to solve a problem. And the further down this track we've gotten, the more I've started to realize that Mother Nature's actually figured this out for us millions of years ago. We've just to understand how these systems actually work. And the irony is that the more we step back and the less time we spend interfering, the easier the system becomes, because it seems to self-correct. I talk about point of balance, about optimization. There is a sweet spot, and maximization is not the sweet spot, but optimization of a huge array of ecosystem functions as well as producing food seems to be the ultimate win-win.
Okay.
In 2015, I would never have thought to paint the picture I'm discussing today.
Okay, just a quick question before we go back to Jeremy. Have your cattle numbers increased with the greater biomass to eat? And has your vet bill gone down as the grazers self-medicate? Yeah,
so the vet and med bills dropped dramatically. Other than last year when we were battling 3 or 4 months of snow, the feed bill has reduced. The cattle herd has moved from about 100 cows towards 180. So the livestock units on the farm have increased, and they will continue to increase. I don't even think we're 50% of the way there yet to what our final destination will be.
And somebody else is asking, have you changed your cattle breed, and how does the methane output from livestock compare to the carbon sequestration from the grass?
I haven't changed. There's 2 questions on there. I haven't changed the cattle breed, but we are working on reducing mature size of cows. Again, there's an optimization of physical frame size of an animal you can carry on the quality of nutrition that you're producing and the animal impact. So we're reducing cow size, which is allowing us to carry a few more cows. So, and that just takes a bit of time. You're 3 years from conception to that heifer then calving again. It's a slow burn. The methane question, cattle are getting methane, ruminants are getting methane thrown at them as a major issue. Methane is about bacteria and microbiology in the rumen. It's actobacteria it's called, which is a specialist bacteria that creates methane within the rumen. That same bacteria is also found in any aerobic environment. So rice fields in other parts of the world, global rice production, it creates 1/3 of the world's methane. Within a more diverse grazing system, these bacteria and how active they are in the rumen are reduced. So the actual methane animal is producing in a more regenerative grazing system, because there's a greater diversity of plants, therefore there's a bit more self-medication, as you touched on, David. It means the methane production is actually less. It's still there, but it's less.
Okay. Can I ask you to stop sharing your screen, please, Alex, if that's okay, just so we can, and then we can get Jeremy back up again. A couple of questions for you, Jeremy, that were asked earlier on. I hope you're still with us. Have you got a baseline survey of natural capital, Jeremy, and how are you quantifying any increase?
Yes, well, we've quantified all sorts of things on the estate at Bunloit. And the work is still in progress. The scientists are working to a deadline of getting it ready for the climate summit, but we're using every technique we can lay our hands on in the first year. And if I can just pick a couple that are particularly exciting, the LiDAR surveys of the trees are showing us interesting data compared to any assumptions you might make just from the Woodland Code. I think landowners with plentiful broadleafs on their estates can realistically hope for a bit of a kick up in economic reward going forward. And we've also used the other thing that's excited me, and I didn't know much about it before this work started, was the so-called eDNA studies of biodiversity. So for people who don't know this technique, the biologists can actually take stream samples and look at the inventory of DNA in it using artificial intelligence to analyze all the genomes and tell you what the inventory of plants and animals is in the catchment area of the stream. It's quite remarkable. And we're getting it's expensive at this point, but we're getting results on Bunloit that are very interesting indeed. Forgive me for not stealing thunder for the report down the track and making sure all the T's are dotted and the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted. But it's, you know, we're really hopeful at this point based on the early results of being able to come up with a great inventory. And then of course the real excitement starts next year and the year after as we assess the impact of the management techniques.
Okay, and just another question, how do you foresee this affecting the existing wider rural community? And just a linked question to that is, at the moment you're relying on wealthy benefactors. How do you monetize this in the longer term?
Well, there's no escaping the fact that we need the policymakers to deliver on what they've said they're going to do. They fully accept the climate crisis, the biodiversity crisis, and both in Westminster and Edinburgh, we're being told there'll be big changes coming. And I think probably most people on the call know there's a lot of work underway, but no firm policies yet set out. So there will need to be a change in the economic reward system. It's going to be very difficult to make this happen just from, you know, forestry products and ecotourism. You can slow the cash burn, and we're doing that, but it will need that system change to come if all this is going to work. And we're not talking about the economics of individual estates like Bunloit and other estates. We're talking about the societal response to existential threats of climate meltdown and biodiversity collapse.